Welcome to the Time for a Reset podcast, the podcast where I, Paul Frampton, interview senior marketers on the big issues of the day and the thing that they want to see reset with an ever-changing landscape. Welcome back to another episode of Time for a Reset. This morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Wendy McEwan. Wendy is a practicing marketeer working out in Singapore in Asia. And Wendy has had a fascinating career where she has transversed from publisher side to SaaS side, working for Oracle. She's advised in the ad tech space for ExchangeWire. She's supported and been part of a lot of IAB initiatives. She sits on the Marketing Society team out in Singapore. And these days she sits over an entire marketing department. So rather unusually, Wendy is well kind of set up to be able to talk about everything that's going on in the marketing industry right now, all the way through from building brands down to how technology is used and how marketing sits within the broader kind of business strategy. So Wendy, good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul.
Or I should say good evening, actually, because given you're in Singapore and I'm in London, we have quite a big time difference.
That's right. Yes, it's evening for me, but thanks for having me on the podcast. It's so exciting to finally be connected with you. I've been a big fan for many years.
And likewise, we're both big fans of Twitter. So look, appreciate you making the time. So as you know, we kick off with asking our guests to tell me what is the thing that you would most like to hit reset on? If I could give you a magic wand or you could press a button and reset something right now, what would that be, Wendy?
It may seem a little left field to mention on a marketing podcast, but I would say I'd love to set reset on an individual's perception, all the individuals out there perception on the value of the office and why working from home forever might not be the best idea for your career.
Interesting. So expand a little more. I mean, I think you're actually in the office right now, aren't you? So I guess things out in Asia maybe are a little bit further ahead than in Europe, and things are a bit more normal. Most people are not in the office here. So what have you seen? What aspects of the office and the benefits of being in the office have you seen from being back in the office for, I don't know, a few weeks, few months?
Yeah, I first started coming back to the office in July, in and out. I mean, I was in and out a little bit even. We had lockdown in Singapore for May and June, April, May, June. And, you know, there was a lot of things that I became aware of that I hadn't really thought of. You know, I love working from home. My setup at home is incredible. I have 3 screens. You know, I've been living a digital life for 20 years. I absolutely love working from home, and I'm a parent. You know, I've seen more of my kids. I've had the lowest amount of mummy guilt ever. But there's a few things, you know, and in some parts of Asia, it's very normal to be back in the office, you know, in Hong Kong, China, Korea, Taiwan, etc. In other parts, people aren't back at all. So it definitely does differ by market. It differs by sector, and it differs by city in some cases. But I think there's a couple of things I hear with my technology background and then my current kind of industry category of real estate and property. I hear a couple of layers of language that worry me. One is around where people talk about the tasks that they're doing and their ability to do those tasks. They're very comfortable doing those tasks at home independently. And they talk a lot about, you know, I can do my email at home and I can do these administrative things from home, and I don't need to be in the office and I don't need to be around other people. And when I hear the language people use, I think back to when I worked in a technology company and the language we used around the value of automation and the opportunity that AI would bring to business, where you talk about freeing up your individual employees from the mundane to help them focus on the strategic and the innovative. And we use a lot of the same language to talk about the value of the office. And the reason why you would come back to the office is that ability to generate collaboration and innovation and spark creativity. So there's a lot of duplication of language between why you should adopt automation and AI and why you should want to be in the office. So I think when you're signing up to be a work from home worker and to operate independently and individually, you do need to be cautious about what you're signing up for long term.
It's a fascinating insight, and not one that I've heard to date. And you've obviously spent, as you said earlier, quite a bit of time in the tech industry, and there are lots of technology that, or technology solutions that people have become more familiar with in the last 6 months that are enabling collaboration. Do you still think it's pretty tough to replicate being in a room with people with a whiteboard through technology?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation a while back about this topic with the marketing head of Slack in APAC, and her response to me was, we would argue that you can achieve that through their collaboration tools. And I think for people like you and I who have worked in digital and lived digital lives for a really long time, that makes perfect sense. But even when I worked in a tech company and we introduced Slack into that company, probably 75% of the company didn't know how to use it. And they certainly didn't use it in a way that kept them visible and surfaced their expertise to people beyond their immediate reporting function. And that's the other big concern around ultimately the long term, the longer that people are not considering their need to be visible, that invisibility tax. And I think in Asia in particular, we have this challenge for minorities and people who aren't used to using their voice in a digital environment, where the longer that this goes on, the more invisible they're going to become, and to their boss, their boss's boss, and the people that could help them be promoted and recognized for their contribution to the business.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty profound point. And I guess the emphasis and the onus has to be on some of the leaders to make sure that they encourage people to be seen and to speak up. But I can absolutely see that if we continue this way for the foreseeable future, that could be a challenge. And do you think that, is it fair to say that invisibility would affect women more than men? I mean, you talked about minorities. If you're a minority in Asia and female, I imagine that you're more likely to be to feel like you're maybe being forgotten. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's women, it's people who don't usually typically use their voice. And you've run international teams and been part of global companies. And often there are certain cultures and certain people from around the world who always dominate those conference calls and those group conversations. And in an environment where that's the norm, even to the point where whether or not you turn your video on, and this is something people are still learning, like in a lot of conference calls, you still see certain people that will tend to turn their video off. And so that, wanting to have a voice, wanting to be heard, being comfortable with using your voice through whatever technologies are available is still a massive learning curve for a lot of people. And it's also a massive confidence, a lack of confidence in a lot of people that aren't used to being required to use their voice, particularly when they're in back office functions or when they're in functions where they haven't been required to have a point of view previously. So I think there's a lot of dangers there. But on the other side, what's been really surprising to me is all the things I didn't remember that were great about being in an office, like the water cooler, the proverbial water cooler, like seeing people that I haven't had Zoom meetings with, seeing people that I don't have a direct relationship with, but who contribute to my interaction with the company and my brand affinity to the company. They help with the culture. They help me form a point of view on why I love working for this company. And they help remind me what it is that I can learn about this business. And they teach me about this business when I run into them in the kitchen or I run into them in the lobby. And those things you don't get in a 100% virtual environment. So, and just the energy from being in the CBD and being downtown and being somewhere that isn't my neighborhood and isn't my bedroom has been fantastic for my mental health.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think we can sometimes forget, and to use your term again, this what's visible and what's invisible, we can sometimes forget those energizing moments or those insights that you stumble across just because you bump into people. And if that's not there, then those things, you may not necessarily note them every day, but after a while, that they start to be missed. So before we move on to talk a little bit more about what your view is on what's happening with marketing and technology, what would be your, if you were running your own business, like what kind of model would you put in place between office and work from home, given the many different age gaps, generations, presence of children, not children? Like, there are lots of different demographics involved, but if you were putting together a company that launched now for this period, how would you go about encouraging the right type of environment?
I think that flexibility and individual choice is really crucial, right? That people have a genuine fear for their own safety and well-being for a reason in a lot of places. So having that individual flexibility and choice is super important. But there also needs to be training and constant communication that goes with that around how to consciously, it's like unconscious bias training in a way. It's like that next step around consciously enabling people to stay connected, to have those water cooler moments, but also to give them experiences that remind them what was great about being face-to-face, whether that be in an office environment or a restaurant environment or a park environment. The more disconnected people become, the more fragmentation and disintermediation that could come to your company culture, etc. So I think I would strive, depending on what was safe in the country and the city that I was trying to build that company in, I would strive to constantly train and coach my people how to be present digitally, how to give them the opportunity to express their point of view and kind of bring them into the limelight, equally across the team, and then try to bring them together physically in whatever way I could at some kind of frequency, because I think it is really important. And I just forgot how much of a difference it makes to have a different environment. And just that sitting around overhearing other people talking about stuff is also super cool. And I forgot how interesting that can be.
Yeah, and that, I suppose, is a nice segue into us talking about marketing per se, because it's a people business. It's about curiosity and human behavior and how human behavior changes. And we just spent 10 minutes talking about how behavior has changed as a result of people working from home versus the office. And marketing, again, that's exactly what marketing is all about. So I'm fascinated through this period. I mean, you sit at leadership tables and have seen probably what's going on from a COVID perspective related to business. Would you say marketing is more important right now during this period, or has it slipped down the agenda as a result of the focus on HR, for instance, or maybe the importance of the office, as you just said? Like, where would you say marketing sits in terms of priority right now at board table?
I think it really, really depends on the sector. I think it depends on the market, like the country and the culture of that country and the culture of that sector. And it really, really depends on the experience of the talent involved. I read a really interesting article from, the illustrious Professor Galloway over the weekend, saying there was two different types of CMO, the brand-led CMO and the business-led CMO. And I think where you have that ability to really have a conversation with the C-suite around the contribution and the ability to drive growth and stay connected to your customer and connect touch points across the entire business around your customer, the customer experience, prospects, etc., then you would be central to the conversation. Or if you're in a digitally native business versus a legacy business, where growth hacking and marketing is essential to the DNA of those businesses, and the CEO probably comes from an environment of understanding what digital and technology can bring to their business, then probably the CMO sits right there.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry.
Sorry, go on, Wendy, go.
I was going to say in other businesses where, sales and marketing has so much overlap right now, there's such a blur between what is marketing and what is selling. And I've always said marketers need to think more like sellers and sellers need to think more like marketers. So I think that the ability to recognize who has contributed what and the alignment around the growth investment initiatives that are worth investing in, I think that would come down to the talent involved in making those decisions and the CEO's ability to comprehend what's possible and therefore what's worth investing in and continuing to double down on through this period.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess to your point around if you're in more of a tech-driven business, the CEO or founder might well understand the landscape better. I guess that they're at least more familiar with the concept of putting money into the Facebook and Googles of this world than maybe they would have been in terms of how you buy TV. But would you say that distinction between brand marketeer and business marketeer is a commentary on marketing of the past, marketing of the future, or is it more of just a mindset of how the chief marketing officer acts as a strategic growth leader at the board table rather than just bringing advertising to the table?
I think it is definitely a bit of both. I think it's hard to be credible to a board if you're not speaking their language. And right now the board is without a doubt freaking out about the safety of their employees and the future viability of the business, right? Depending on what industry category you're in. And if you were going to sit at that table and talk about buying advertising and building brand without connecting to those very real concerns, and this is why the head of HR is probably spending more time at the board table than they ever have, why the head of corporate real estate is probably at the board table for the first time ever, because they have very real issues that the business has to make decisions around. What happens to our office space going forward? How much of a cost, because real estate will always be probably the number 2 or number 3 cost for any company after headcount and after their employee cost. So where does the marketing investment come in there? And how do you add value in that conversation? And I think the second one is skills and capability, where maybe it's a generational change. If you've always relied on agencies and third parties to be your skills, right? To be your skill base, and you haven't necessarily been exposed to the tactics and techniques because you haven't, as people accelerate to more senior responsibilities, they get more and more hands off, right? That's just how it works. Yeah. But right now, there's never been more change, right? In the last 10 years, if you've mostly been a manager and not a hands-on practitioner, then how would you know how you can champion what needs to change across your entire business in terms of technology, org structure, talent, to be able to connect the data across your business to be more effective in how you deliver outcomes and better experiences for your customers?
One of my favourite topics that you've taken us into, and I think actually you articulated it beautifully, which is if you've kind of outsourced the responsibility to understand what's going on and have curiosity around it, as well as the actual execution, then where does that leave you in this new landscape where increasingly technology has been democratized and there is talent available for you to be able to build your teams in-house should you want to. So where do you sit on like the view of whether marketers should begin to do more of what they previously outsourced to agencies themselves? I mean, as you rightly pointed out, data and technology have changed that landscape, and you've worked in businesses that have provided their services direct to brands as well as to agencies, Oracle, and advised ad tech companies who increasingly, I guess, are going direct to clients and brands rather than necessarily through the agency. So there's a big change in terms of do these businesses need to always go through agencies, or should they just transact with the end buyer? Like what's your view on as a senior marketeer on the balance of building capabilities yourself versus working with partners?
Well, there's so many layers of partners, and I didn't appreciate this at all until I did go to work in tech. And, you know, I was a publisher, as you said, and then I worked in ad tech, and I thought I understood data and data-driven marketing and what the landscape looked like. But actually, when you're just talking about ad tech, you're barely scratching the surface. And the reason why that whole mad tech and even marketing tech and ad tech actually have very little in common. So when you have that kind of billions of dollars of media buying kind of environment and the creative layer, and then you have a whole other world of systems integrators and consultants that are helping business really look at the kind of digital transformation of their entire business and connecting data across their business. So that whole prospecting and talking to people you don't know layer, and then the entire layer of connecting all your insight about who you do know and how you're interacting with them from a marketing perspective, a customer service perspective, a sales perspective, a supply chain perspective. That's a huge array of a whole nother layer of partners and consultants. And that layer is really weak in Asia. I think in Australia and developed markets like the US and the UK is much more sophisticated and much more connected between ad tech and martech. I think in this part of the world, there's still a lot of gaps, and that advisory layer to handhold you through to success in terms of adopting something and then making it work for your business. Just when you think about marketing automation, like email marketing, doing email marketing well, which some people do outsource to agencies. Actually, a lot of massive companies who, you know, they'll outsource these loyalty CRM kind of programs to agencies. And it's astounding, really, that they don't necessarily know how to actually use those tools themselves. So I think what you in-house is that hand-holding through to value from tools. But I don't think necessarily media buying makes sense to in-house. What you do have to in-house is connecting the data across your business and understanding who your customer is, and then going to look for more customers like that in your prospecting, which you may use agency partners to help you with. You're definitely going to use integration partners to help you connect things together, and you're probably going to use consultants to help you understand why you need to do all of the above and how you go about it. But I think there is a role for partners to play, because people's comprehension of the type of talent they need and how they can bring that talent into the organization is still quite nascent. And even for me, you know, I was hired as marketing, communications and digital, and I hired data and content and analytics people. And I had to explain to the people I was hiring what I was hiring for. And luckily I had a boss who trusted me to kind of throw my own job description out the window and then recreate and kind of reinvent where I wanted to take what we were going to do. And I keep iterating on that. And obviously COVID has kind of blown that up, but
sure,
you have to be able to create content. Data tells you what kind of content is going to work and helps you get better at how to, you know, the channels that you need to be present in. And then you're going to connect that with external insight from partners.
Wonderful. There's so much in there, Wendy. I mean, first off, I love the very simple articulation that you gave of the MarTech and AdTech piece. I think a lot of people get extremely kind of caught up in the confusion between how technology plays on, as you say, the kind of internal retention, customer experience, sales side versus advertising technology. But also, I love the points that you made around you need to actually bring in advice and support and advisory to help you navigate where you need technology and data to take more, to at least take more responsibility for the planning and strategic side of it. And then the execution side, it's obviously up to the brand and the size of that brand and how much they spend on media to deploy it. But I mean, listening to you, Wendy, it strikes me that your unique perspective as a result of being publisher side, digging into ad tech, having kind of had an understanding of I guess, software as a service and being a marketer gives you the ability to look across all of that and to see where the challenges and opportunities are. But as you rightly pointed out, there are quite a lot of marketeers, and if we use Mr. Galloway's kind of phrase of brand marketeers, there are a lot that are very familiar with the old world of advertising and building your business through spending money on creative and then finding people through traditional media. How well kind of set up do you think marketeers as a whole are for what's coming down the line? Because we're only at the very start of the whole kind of technology enabling marketing journey, surely. And it feels like, as you've been talking, and I've reflected on this with other guests, that quite a lot are either in the want an easy solution, so we'll go to Google and Facebook because that's easy, or we'll just outsource to an agency or a consultancy because it's too complicated. Do you see more marketeers leaning in to go, we need to understand this stuff, we need to build capability, we need to understand the technology as much as we understand kind of people? What do you see happening in the wider industry, maybe like more broadly than just Asia? And do you think it's happening fast enough? Sorry, that was a very, very long-winded question, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah. And wow, we could probably have a whole podcast on this this question. You know, I used to talk a lot with Erica Kerner, who's the chair of the Marketing Society here in Asia. And I remember we did a podcast with the ExchangeWire team a while back now, a year or two back, and we talked about marketers who had P&L responsibility and marketers who had just had brand budgets or just been field marketers. And so when you think of the P&Gs of the world, and, you know, Erica came from sports and luxury marketing, where marketers have managed a P&L, they very much have that C-suite language and ability to engage. They don't necessarily have the technology comprehension, but they very much have that ability to lean into where are we going as a business, and how is what we're doing making the contribution that matters. And going back to, is Facebook and Google easy? Facebook and Google, ultimately, do they drive the outcomes that the company needs? The question is, who's setting the outcomes? Because and this comes back to the CEO, and what I used to champion when I worked in tech was, it isn't actually the CMO that we need to coach to want to adopt marketing technology and customer experience technology. It's actually the CEO.
Right.
Because I think the CEO, in their ignorance, has been letting the CMO and maybe even the head of sales get away with mediocrity for far too long, because they don't set the KPIs that they should be expecting in terms of the delivery from the front office. And you know, head of customer service would be in there as well. So they don't enable the breaking.
The CEO doesn't know what those KPIs should be.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. They need educating, because they don't enable the breaking down of the silos, the connecting of the data and the insight, or the adoption of the right kind of talent. So they might hire a chief digital officer, which, you know, Professor Galloway and many others talk about. You know, a chief digital officer should be redundant by now. You shouldn't have one, right? Like, everyone in your C-suite should be cognizant enough of what's possible to be able to bring that capability to the business. It's doing business in a digital world. It's not doing digital business. And so, you know, absolutely, it starts with the CEO and setting the right KPIs, and then either upskilling and retraining the talent they have, or bringing in talent that can take advantage of those tools. The question is it an IT thing or a marketing thing? And there's been many, many events around that debate, right? But I do think marketing tech and front office tech in general, I think the most misunderstood word I've noticed in the last year is CRM. What is CRM is a question you'll get 100 different answers to. And, you know, that whole kind of customer interaction versus prospect interaction, like your unknown versus known customer. How many CMOs spend all their time advertising to people that are already their customers because they're not smart enough to connect those dots? So I do think there's a huge opportunity there for people who want to upskill, and there's never been a better opportunity to do that because there's so much training available literally for free and learning available literally for free right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. We could probably talk about this all day. Like, trying to think like the most interesting kind of angle to go from there. And for me, it's, I mean, you used to work at big broadcast publisher, and the way the world used to work is that advertisers would come with their checkbook to access that audience. But as you rightly just said, there are now so many opportunities through technology and platforms to know who your audience is and then go after them in a different way. On that spectrum, some big advertisers will look at that data-driven marketing, often called programmatic, and go, "Oh, that's the dirty end of the market. It's not brand marketing. It's not trustworthy, brand safety, etc., etc." Versus others who are building out immense capability in data and tech and even in activation internally. So it's quite interesting how you seem to get these splits of opinion, and that, like, if you're a marketeer, like, how important is it to have the same relationship with the media owners and publishers that you used to work in, versus how much of it can you actually do, like whether it's content or data, do you think you can actually do yourselves these days?
Who is going to pay for the news, Paul?
I love your views on this topic.
It is a question I've been trying to answer for at least 10 years, and I still don't know the answer. I think a marketer's job is to help the business drive growth, and they need to deliver sales leads, commerce transactions, conversions, qualified marketing, sales qualified leads, whatever the case may be. It's not their job to buy premium mastheads, just like it's not their job to buy Google or Facebook. Their job is to find who their customer is, who the people are that look like their customer, and where are the channels, where are the places that they can interact with those people, and what's the best way to do that. And I think what you just said was really interesting, because you said programmatic is data-driven marketing. I would say programmatic is data-driven advertising, right, and that there's a whole bunch of layers that go with that, which is data-driven marketing, that help you be smarter in how you do programmatic advertising. And I think that every brand right now has to think about what's the value exchange between them and their customer or their prospects, because that's exactly what a publisher does, right? Like, a publisher creates an environment that gives you information and insight, as you know, whether it's Bloomberg or CNN or a reviews website like what I used to work for, where, you know, you wanted to know which mobile phone to buy, you read our reviews, and then you made a decision, an informed purchase decision around which mobile phone. Today, every brand needs to think about that. When you think about where we're going with third-party cookies, every brand needs to understand what is it that is useful to my customer, and therefore my customer will give me data and information about them in exchange for that, because that's how anyone is trying to build their first-party data, right? And it's kind of, as you think about creators and the influencers increasing their value, like all the journalists moving to Substack, you could pay them directly to reach a niche of the audience you're trying to reach. And so I absolutely think brands and mastheads are brands in themselves. Like, publishers are brands, just like I'm a brand, I work for a brand and you work for a brand. So we're all working in environments where we have the ability to build a direct relationship with the people who want to know about what we have to sell and what information we have to share with them. And I guess it is because I was a publisher for so long that I think that way. But I see the reason why I would need to work with a Tatler or a Bloomberg, but I also don't necessarily base it on the fact that they invest a whole bunch of money on journalism. I base it on the fact that the customers I want to reach are probably reading their content, and maybe that can help draw them in to read my content, and then I can get them into my database and then continue the relationship independently of that masthead.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, couldn't we? I mean, I think the whole idea of owned, earned, paid, and starting by actually looking at your own assets, like you say, and giving people reasons to come to your own platforms and then to keep them engaged and provide value. If that was done brilliantly well, then in principle, paid media should be the last thing that you spend your money on, and should be amplifying and finding new audiences and bringing them to that content rather than just being the first port of call.
But you do need the paid media to help with that amplification, as you say, the amplification and the distribution of what you create. That not everybody can be Red Bull to create the kind of content that's just going to go viral, right? So there's got to be a mix of investment, but absolutely it can't just all be down to buying space somewhere else. You have to think, what's your space? What's your value proposition?
Well, it feels like a nice segue into the final question, Wendy, which is in a world where, as we've talked about, there are many more options to actually building your brand and growing your business through marketing, yet maybe quite a few that follow the same playbook. What advice would you give to other marketers in trying to be brave and navigate what is obviously a fairly complex landscape, but one with, as you've said several times, full of opportunity?
Well, I guess I can't necessarily recommend that everybody go work in a bunch of different industries and categories because that takes quite a long time. I think for me, the single biggest opportunity has been learning from my peers and creating a network of people that I respect to learn from. And an extension of that is the Marketing Society. And the reason I've been a part of the Marketing Society for so long is that ability to lean into peer-to-peer learning, reassurance, advice, insight from, and openness to other industries. I think the biggest thing that gives me confidence is I can see parallels when I look at the disintermediation of one sector. I can see parallels from other sectors. Media was the first sector to be disintermediated and massively disrupted. So being comfortable with change and the ability to adapt and pivot came out of that. But now I can see parallels across so many different sectors. So keep your eyes and ears open. Always be looking for insight and parallels from other industries and other roles, and ideally stay connected to your customers. And back to my point around there's never been so much information available. I reach out to people that are our target audience and I talk to them. And I can use the excuse of I'm new to the industry, but most people are actually open to having a conversation. So don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to find people you want to learn from and ask them questions, because everybody is open to training and trading insight, because now no one knows where this is all going. So ask the questions.
Yeah, no, I love that, Wendy. And I think, as you say, probably the vast majority of listeners can't go and have quite the schooling that you were fortunate enough to have across the different parts of the industry. But I think this interview demonstrates and illustrates that when you actually do have exposure to the multiple parts of this wonderful advertising and marketing industry, you can create a much more rounded perspective on where the value is. And as you say, it starts with curiosity, and it starts with actually wanting to learn. And I think a lot of listeners can take that and at least do something with that, even if they can't go and get a job in all of the different sectors that you've been fortunate enough to work in. So look, Wendy, it's been an absolute delight. I feel like we might have to do part 2 because I don't think we even got started. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Paul. It was a delight to finally be connected to you.
Thank you for tuning into this latest podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll be back again very soon, interviewing a senior marketer and understanding what they would like to reset in the marketing industry. In the meantime, if you want to check out me, you can find me on Twitter, Paul_Framp, and you can find my new business, which is a hybrid marketing consultancy helping with in-housing, digital strategy and marketing attribution at controlvexposed.co.uk, on Twitter under CVE, or on LinkedIn under Control V Exposed. Look forward to you coming back next time and having more interesting conversations. Thank you.